Hey everyone, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a pretty heavy but fascinating concept from our source text, the Christian idea of becoming a new creation. Sounds great on paper, right? But the text actually digs into why human nature stubbornly, and I mean almost instinctively, resists it. And more importantly, we're going to look at what happens when someone actually accepts this transformation and steps onto a completely new path. A path that, as we'll see, has absolutely no roadmap. We're skipping a traditional agenda today because I want to start with a visceral feeling. Imagine being 13 years old again. You're sitting at the absolute bottom of your class, totally convinced that the entire roadmap you had for your life is just destroyed. Every hope, every plan, gone. This deep, gut-wrenching feeling of a broken human roadmap is exactly where our source material starts to introduce the profound need for a total life reboot. The core foundation here is 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says that if anyone is in Christ, they're a new creation. The old is gone, the new has arrived. We aren't just talking about a subtle shift or, some minor behavior modification. The text is offering a complete, total restart for anyone who feels like their map is ruined and they're just suffocating. But that brings us to the intellectual core of all this. If a total, clean slate restart is actually possible, why do we instinctively push it away? The text points out a really curious phenomenon. People will walk right past Bible verses on telephone poles or in public squares, messages offering rest for the weary, and maybe they feel a tiny flicker of curiosity, but their immediate gut reaction is to reject it. So why do we do that? Why do we push away this specific offer of help? That leads us into Section 1, the lost old self, the illusion of control. The source suggests this rejection usually isn't about some deep philosophical debate. It's actually a blind instinct driven by self-deception. We fall into this trap of believing everything is perfectly fine, so we feel absolutely no need for saving or real change. The author even points out that a lot of people just want a superficial transactional faith, like checking a box so a higher power just leaves them alone. We reject divine intervention out of pure pride, staying totally ignorant of the gospel and completely unaware that our personal roadmap is fundamentally broken. Moving right along to Section 2, the blind instinct against salvation, choosing misery. This brilliantly illustrates a super relatable reality from the text, because this doesn't just affect our spiritual lives, it affects how we treat each other. We all know people trapped in this old self. Honestly, maybe we've been people like this. The text notes how we'll cling to grudges from 10 days ago, or literally 10 years ago, constantly playing the victim and making ourselves and everyone around us miserable. Contrast that with a new creation, which is willing to self-reflect, open to transformation, and actually willing to let things go. It's wild, but people will literally choose misery and hold on to decades-old grudges rather than self-reflect and change their toxic roadmap. So how do we actually get to that transformation? That brings us to Section 3, the life-reversing cross, the ultimate disruptor. The source identifies the ultimate disruptor here, the physical toll and sacrifice of Jesus on the Via Dolorosa, the path of suffering. This wasn't just a casual tourist walk. It was an agonizing path walked by a weak, beaten Jesus carrying a heavy wooden cross. It was so intense that an outsider, Simon of Cyrene, actually had to be pulled in just to help bear the weight. The text argues that this specific, profound sacrifice is exactly what purchases this new life for humanity. It's this intense physical and spiritual disruption that finally breaks through our stubborn self-deception. We see this disruption perfectly in the extreme historical example of the Apostle Paul. Here's a guy who was actively persecuting early Christians. His roadmap was literally built on destruction. Yet he encounters this new life, completely throws his old map in the trash, and becomes a joyful, albeit persecuted missionary. He fully recognized that it was the gospel that disrupted his path and completely rewrote his existence, declaring, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am." To bring this into the modern day, the text shares this incredible sequence about that 13-year-old girl we mentioned at the start. She struggled with persistently poor grades, hit a rebellious phase in middle school, skipped classes, ran away, the whole 9 yards. Finally, she hits absolute rock bottom, dead last in her class exams, facing near expulsion. Her life script had completely crashed. But then, a major turning point. She visits a church with her grandmother and hears that exact promise from 2 Corinthians, the promise of being a new creation. The source describes her transformation so vividly. It wasn't about her suddenly finding some strict new set of rules to follow to fix her grades. No, it was described like finally breathing oxygen again after suffocating under the heavy weight of her old life. The pressure of her broken roadmap was just lifted. She was given a clean slate, a chance to start completely over through this new life. Which leads us to our final section, the endless path of sanctification. No roadmap. The really crucial point the text makes is that becoming a new creation puts you on the path of sanctification. This is a lifelong, highly difficult journey, and here's the kicker. It is characterized by having absolutely no roadmap. When you toss out your broken human roadmap, you aren't just handed a perfectly predictable, step-by-step itinerary in return. It's a completely unmapped journey. There is no definitive endpoint in this life. You are stepping right into the unknown, sustained entirely by faith in the example of Jesus. Now, while there is zero roadmap, the text assures us we don't have to wander aimlessly or bear the burden all alone. First, we have to acknowledge that life's journey is inherently difficult. The text literally calls it a path of suffering sometimes, but it starts by opening your heart to that restart. When you have absolutely no roadmap, you have to rely on God's strength rather than trying to carry all that pain by yourself. You look to Jesus' example to find meaning in the hardship, and you embrace this continuous, lifelong process of growth. It is an unmapped journey, absolutely, but it's also deeply purposeful. As we wrap up this explainer, the source material leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. It asks us to look at our own lives. Are you still clinging to a broken map? Are you holding on to old grudges and self-deception just because it feels safe, even if it's making you miserable? Or are you ready to drop that old script, take a huge, deep breath of oxygen, and step onto the unmapped path of becoming a new creation? It might be a journey with no roadmap whatsoever, but according to the text, it is the only path that leads to true life. It's a fascinating challenge to leave on. Think about that.